Nothing requires your intervention from this point forward, because what needed to shift has already completed itself. This message didn't arrive to guide you somewhere new or correct something you're doing wrong. It arrived because you've reached a state where motion has become unnecessary. There's a specific internal threshold where effort no longer generates clarity, and clarity no longer demands effort. If you're here now, you've already crossed that threshold. You've probably noticed it showing up as a strange neutrality, replacing what used to feel urgent. A quiet certainty without accompanying excitement. A sense that the pressure to figure everything out has evaporated, even though your external circumstances haven't dramatically transformed. This isn't indecision or passivity. It's completion operating at a frequency your mind doesn't typically register. For an extended period, your system was oriented entirely toward fixing, adjusting, improving, or preparing itself for something ahead. That orientation created momentum, but it also generated constant noise underneath everything you did. Now that noise has dissolved, not because life simplified, but because something inside you stopped resisting what is. When that resistance ends, movement pauses naturally, not as stagnation, but as stabilization. You might feel less compelled to take action, less motivated to explain yourself to anyone, less interested in pushing conversations or outcomes forward before they're ready. This doesn't mean you're withdrawing from life. It means the part of you that needed constant motion to feel secure has finally relaxed its grip. When that part relaxes, your entire system reorganizes itself around coherence instead of effort. Nothing requires intervention from this point, because action would only reintroduce interference. This phase doesn't reward doing. It rewards non-interference. If that feels unfamiliar, it's because most of your life was spent inside systems that only moved when pushed. This one moves when you stop pushing it. If you're feeling a subtle recognition reading this, as if the words aren't telling you something new, but naming something you already sensed beneath your awareness, that recognition is the confirmation you were never consciously looking for. Awareness arrives after the shift completes, never before it. You're not being asked to trust this. You're already living inside it. When nothing requires intervention, your nervous system changes its entire relationship with time. You've probably noticed that waiting no longer carries tension. Silence no longer feels like something demanding to be filled. Pauses in your day feel natural instead of uncomfortable. This isn't because life slowed its pace. It's because your internal rhythm stopped racing ahead of reality. For years, anticipation was your default operating mode. You anticipated problems, conversations, outcomes, reactions before they could even form. That anticipation kept your system alert, prepared, constantly scanning for what might go wrong. But anticipation only exists when the present moment feels insufficient. Now the present no longer feels lacking in any way. And when that happens, urgency collapses without you needing to dismantle it. You might still have plans, responsibilities, directions you're moving toward, but they no longer pull on you emotionally. They simply wait, and that waiting feels stable rather than stressful. This is your system entering coherence. When coherence forms, effort loses all relevance because effort was always compensating for internal fragmentation. Fragmentation required constant vigilance. Coherence doesn't require anything. You might notice this in surprisingly mundane moments. Letting a notification sit without needing to respond immediately. Standing still without reaching for distraction. Making a decision without rehearsing it internally for hours. These aren't habits you forced yourself to change through discipline. They changed because the internal demand disappeared entirely. If this is landing somewhere deep, I want to ask you something. Please subscribe to this channel. I create content specifically for people navigating this exact state, where everything has settled, but nothing looks dramatically different from the outside. Your subscription helps me continue making these messages, and it means you'll have this space when you need to return to this frequency. Thank you. Now let's go deeper. The mind might still attempt to reassert itself by questioning whether you're missing something important, whether you should be doing more, whether this calm is actually dangerous complacency. That questioning isn't guidance. It's residue. A system trained to survive through control doesn't immediately trust environments where control becomes unnecessary. But your body already knows the truth. Your body has slowed its alarm signals. Your breath has softened without you directing it to. The constant low-level tension you carried for years has released itself. Because of that release, perception has widened dramatically. You see without scanning for threats. You listen without preparing responses. You exist without managing yourself constantly. This isn't something to deepen or maintain through technique. It's something to allow. Nothing requires intervention from this point, because the moment you try to do something with this state, you exit it. The stillness you're inhabiting isn't waiting for instruction. It's completing a process that no longer needs your participation. At the point where nothing requires intervention, control reveals its actual function. Control was never about mastery. It was about reassurance. It was your system's way of staying oriented when coherence felt unstable. You controlled outcomes because you didn't yet trust the internal reference point you were operating from. But now that reference point has stabilized completely. And when internal reference stabilizes, control becomes redundant overnight. This is why attempts to do something now feel heavy in your body. Not morally wrong, physically wrong. Your body registers it as misalignment before your mind can construct justification for it. You've probably noticed that when you try to push an idea, a conversation, or a plan forward prematurely, resistance appears instantly. Not from external circumstances, but internally. Fatigue, irritation, a subtle tightening in your chest or throat. And when you release the push, the tension dissolves immediately. This isn't coincidence. It's precise feedback. Reality is no longer responding to force because force is no longer the correct interface for you. The system you're operating within now responds to clarity, timing, and non-interference. Control collapses not because it failed you, but because it completed its role in your development. And when control drops away, something else activates naturally without effort. Observation without urgency. Awareness without agenda attached to it. You're no longer trying to manage how things unfold. You're simply noticing how they already are. This is why perception feels sharper even though effort has decreased dramatically. Less input creates more signal. Less interference creates more accuracy. You're not becoming passive. You're becoming precise. And precision doesn't rush. Precision waits until movement is completely clean before it acts. This is why the statement "nothing needs to be done" doesn't mean stagnation or withdrawal. It means the old way of doing has finished its cycle. Action will still happen, but it will arise organically instead of being manufactured through willpower. And actions that arise naturally don't drain you. They complete themselves without leaving residue. You might not recognize this immediately as progress because it doesn't feel dramatic. But drama was never actual growth. Drama was compensation for instability. What you're entering now is functional alignment. And functional alignment doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It operates quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. As this state stabilizes further, something subtle but crucial occurs. Life begins to feel ordinary again, but from an entirely different baseline. The intensity that once accompanied every change dissolves, and what remains is simple consistency. Days move without friction. Decisions land without emotional charge attached to them. You might notice you're no longer narrating your internal process to yourself. You're not checking whether you're aligned. You're not evaluating your progress. You're not asking whether you're doing it right. Those questions belong to a phase where alignment fluctuated constantly. Now alignment holds steady, and because it holds, monitoring becomes completely unnecessary. This can feel anticlimactic if you were expecting some moment of dramatic arrival. But arrival was never meant to feel like reaching a peak. Peaks destabilize systems by their nature. What you're experiencing is a settling, a return to simplicity, but with an entirely different internal structure supporting it. You wake up and move through your day without the sense that something needs to be solved first. You rest without guilt. You act without rehearsal. You stop preparing explanations for choices that feel obvious to you. This isn't withdrawal from life. It's participation without distortion. Your nervous system no longer braces against possibility. And because it no longer braces, energy becomes available in a new way. Not explosive energy that spikes and crashes. Sustainable energy. The kind that maintains itself without requiring constant replenishment. This is why you might feel less driven but more present. Less ambitious but more effective in what you actually do. Less reactive but far more responsive when response is genuinely needed. Nothing requires intervention from this point because your system is already operating from the state effort was trying to reach. The work isn't ahead of you. It's behind you. What remains is integration. And integration doesn't require effort. It requires permission. Permission to stop interfering with natural processes. Permission to let life move at the speed required for stability rather than excitement. Permission to trust that what unfolds next won't require you to chase it down. It will meet you exactly where you are. One of the clearest signals that nothing requires intervention is the complete disappearance of urgency. Not motivation. Urgency. Urgency is the sensation that something is slipping away if you don't act this instant. It's rooted in the belief that timing must be controlled or opportunity will vanish. But opportunity only feels fragile when coherence is unstable. When coherence stabilizes completely, urgency loses its entire function. You've probably noticed that deadlines still exist, responsibilities still exist, choices still exist, but they no longer carry emotional pressure. You do what needs doing without internal acceleration. You move without rushing. You wait without anxiety eating at you. This shift can feel profoundly unfamiliar because much of your identity was constructed around managing urgency effectively. You were praised for being proactive, responsive, fast, always prepared. And those traits served you well when life required constant adjustment. But now adjustment is no longer the primary mode. Stability is. This is why your system slows you down internally, even if the external world continues moving quickly around you. You're no longer meant to match the speed of noise. You're meant to hold coherence within it, and coherence never hurries. It allows sequence to reveal itself naturally, in its own time. This is also why anticipation has faded almost completely. You're no longer projecting yourself into future scenarios to feel safe. Safety has relocated entirely to the present moment. And when safety lives in the present, urgency has nothing left to protect. What remains is clarity. You see what needs attention without scanning for danger. You respond when response is genuinely needed, and you remain still when movement would distort alignment. This discernment isn't mental anymore. It's embodied. Your body relaxes into timing. Breath deepens naturally. Attention widens without effort. You're no longer preparing for life. You're inside it. As urgency dissolves, trust changes its entire form. It stops being something you tell yourself and becomes something you operate from automatically. You no longer repeat affirmations to convince yourself. You no longer reassure your mind that things will work out. You no longer talk yourself into believing everything is okay. Those behaviors were bridges used when trust wasn't yet embodied in your system. Now trust is structural. It's felt in how little resistance you experience when making decisions. It's felt in how quickly tension resolves when something doesn't belong in your life. It's felt in how naturally you disengage from paths that once demanded elaborate justification. You're not abandoning responsibility. You're releasing overcorrection. Overcorrection was your mind's attempt to compensate for underlying uncertainty. That uncertainty has dissolved completely. And when it dissolves, behavior simplifies dramatically. You act once instead of revisiting decisions mentally for days. You speak clearly without rehearsing conversations before they happen. You allow outcomes to unfold without micromanaging every variable. This is why confidence now feels quiet instead of performative. It doesn't seek validation from others. It doesn't compare itself. It doesn't defend itself when questioned. It simply functions. Others might notice this shift before you consciously do. They might feel calmer around you without understanding why. Conversations might naturally slow down. Interactions might become more direct and less layered. This isn't because you're influencing them intentionally. It's because coherence transmits automatically through your presence. Systems naturally entrain to stability. People do too. And because you're no longer trying to direct outcomes organize themselves with significantly less friction. This is the paradox of this entire stage. The less you attempt to control reality, the more accurately it responds to you. Nothing requires intervention from this point because the system you're operating within is no longer fragile. It doesn't need constant input or adjustment. It needs consistency. And consistency is already present, already functioning, already stable without you needing to maintain it consciously. Before we close, if this message has resonated at a level you can't quite articulate, please subscribe. I create content for people in exactly this state, where everything has settled internally, but the external world hasn't caught up yet. Your subscription means you'll find your way back here when you need this frequency again. Thank you for being present through this entire message. This is the point where the title becomes completely literal. Nothing needs to be done from here because nothing is actually missing. This doesn't mean life stops moving. It means movement no longer requires your intervention to happen. You're no longer trying to make something occur. You're allowing what's already in motion to complete itself naturally. And that completion happens without you needing to force, manage, or accelerate a single thing.